Chapter 357. Under the light of the spell, Charlotte Sorofia's body seemed to be covered with a layer of golden light in the eyes of Duke Aberville, who was lying on the ground. That was the light of the spell, the light of brilliance, and also the light of wealth. There was nothing that money couldn't solve. If there was, it would mean that there wasn't enough money. As long as it was a problem that could be solved with money, it wasn't a problem. Duke Aberville gazed at the palace complex that had returned to its original state. He looked up at the goddess of wealth in a daze. Xiao Luo repeated with a faint smile. The moment Duke Aberville stood up in silence, the entire sky in the northern region seemed to have risen by 3 inches. It was only at this moment that the astonished Luoya recalled the strength of this man who regarded wealth as his life, and didn't dare to raise any opinions in front of the young mistresses. Before becoming the Duke of Aberville, this honest-looking man had once made a name for himself in the Austin Empire. But after returning to the country to inherit the title of Duke, decades had passed, and the man nicknamed Explosive Bear had gradually lost his temper. In other words, the prosperity of Aberville could be said to be directly related to the stingy and greedy dukes of the past. Can you convert it into resources? Deal. The moment the trade was completed, Oswald blew his whistle. After a long and penetrating whistle, the ground rumbled. In less than 10 seconds, a gigantic magical bear the size of a bus broke through layers of buildings, bringing along debris and gales. At the same time, a huge meteor hammer appeared in Duke Abwill's hand. Where did you get this thing from? Gazing at the weapon in Oswald's hand, the black-haired young man was dumbfounded. But what surprised him more was that it wasn't just the gigantic bear that was coming. More and more bear-riding warriors were rushing over from afar. With a loud roar, Duke Abwil rode a giant bear and charged into the battlefield with a meteor hammer. The Saint Heroes Guild, who had never provoked this bear ancestor, was completely dumbfounded. The giant meteor hammer whistled like the wind and lightning and smashed the head of a level 3 source-rank cultist. Noelle could not help but condemn the reddish-haired young lady when she realized that there was a large group of new troops around her. However, Charlotte did not care at all. She kept firing with the jeweled trigger in her hand, the smile on her lips elegant and dignified. After receiving the blessings of the Gulandair and Paytila, Cynthia, Rodney, and Wood's body's side effects were greatly reduced. The advantage of being cultists became more and more obvious. Although they were only level 3 source rank, as divine warriors, their combat strength had reached level 2 quasi-source. Looking at his subordinates who were about to die in the distance, Francis was burning with anger. Luo Yaokat, sinister, cunning, despicable, and shameless. She looked like an innocent and harmless child, but her mind was so deep. Mother Goddess is watching me. Not good. Retreat. He's going to self-destruct. At this point, there was not much curse power left in Francis's body. However, as long as he sacrificed all his bones, he could completely convert the curse power into death aura. However, if he were to unleash his power aimlessly, the effect of the attack would not be ideal. However, it was more than enough to kill a child who did not have much supernatural power left in his body. Go to hell. Luo Yaokat. Boom! A violent explosion shook the sky. A black shockwave with the power to suck flesh and blood swept out and swept across the square. Chapter 358. When Francis leaped into the air and launched the final blow to kill Luoya, an unprecedented sense of crisis rose in the heart of the reddish-brown-haired girl. The moment Francis made up his mind, Xiao Luo's bloodline fluctuated violently. The unique command of fate made the girl aware of the danger almost subconsciously. In the midst of Francis' hateful roar, the violent explosion with the black smoke with the attribute of God was imminent. Xiao Luo, who was familiar with the similar curse mechanism, understood Francis' idea almost instantly, and made an emergency response. In Xiao Luo's rapid shout, the liquid golden soul instantly wrapped the black-haired boy's body, and then ejected into the distance like an airbag. Luoya only saw a golden color in front of his eyes. The next moment, the violent acceleration made him plunge into the inner wall of the golden soul. Unlike the almost gaseous death attack, the golden soul was subject to great wind resistance and was not light. The result of such a race was almost obvious. In a few seconds, The wind of darkness approached step by step. However, just as the death attack was about to catch up with Luoya and give him a fatal blow, a strange spell fluctuation came from the black-haired boy's arms again. Remaining use. 1 second to remember. When the black-haired boy saw the system prompt, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. The next moment, a violent shock suddenly descended, causing Luoya to be knocked around inside the golden soul. Boom. Wang. Enchantment. There's an enchantment here, and it's even an enchantment that can block this kind of divine attack. The boy, who had just experienced a crisis, blinked with a blank expression, then looked down at the system. He felt that his eyes were about to tear up. Blessed ear of rice, forever a god. But this place is... There's someone. In a beautifully decorated room, there was a pink-haired girl in luxurious clothes who was obviously not an ordinary person. She seemed to be pouring tea with a teapot in her hand, and there was a figure in armor beside her. In the silent room, Luoya Akat stared blankly at the two people not far away. The reason for his attention was very simple. Xia had extraordinary powers in various races. Her body was strong because of mutations, and there were countless people with special abilities. Her hair was actually very colorful, just like the girls around Luoya. But it had to be said that even so, there were very few people with pink hair. Luoya paid attention to the pink-haired girl who seemed to be of a different race, but what surprised him even more was the figure in heavy armor beside her. The reason was simple. Luoya knew this person. Looking at the figure wearing heavy armor and observing Luoya with the pink-haired girl, the black-haired young man was stunned for a moment before he captured the information of this person in his mind. What was going on? Why was he here? Ah, wait, so that's how it is. Did he bring his girlfriend here to see the aurora? Aberville was indeed not far from the Kingdom of Knights, Pender. I didn't expect to bump into him here. The black-haired young man who had this thought breathed a sigh of relief and stood up. When he was about to open his mouth to apologize politely and leave, he didn't expect a magnetic exclamation to suddenly come from the armor. In the room, hearing William's exclamation, the black-haired young man widened his eyes and his body instantly stiffened. Chapter 359. In a dark room without lights, the black-haired young man stared blankly ahead. The aurora outside the window penetrated the glass and shone on the figure in heavy armor and the pink-haired young lady, adding a layer of different dreamy colors to them. What's going on? He knows me? It was normal for Luoya to recognize Williams. After all, he had never met him before, but he knew a lot of people. Williams' features were so obvious that it was hard for him not to remember. However, it was too abnormal for Williams to recognize Luoya. If a person knew the previous Luoya, then there might be some unknown fate between them. But if a person knew the current Luoya, then the problem was too big. The last person who knew him was the Sage Society that wanted to kill him. I see. You must be frightened when I suddenly called your name. But don't worry, Luoya Akat. We are your friends. Not bad. If your current state doesn't affect your memory, you should still remember our reminder in your dream. Hearing William's words, the black-haired young man couldn't help but reveal a surprised expression. After a slight pause, Luoya immediately recalled the nightmare he had on the way to the northern region. Looking at his reaction, the pink-haired young lady picked up the pen on the table and wrote something on the notebook. Then she raised the notebook gently. Could it be that the one who spoke in the dream was you? Hearing this advice that always appeared at the end of the dream, Luoya stared ahead and couldn't help but ask in surprise. The pink-haired young lady didn't answer, and only nodded again. Seeing this, Luoya fell into silence for a moment, and his tensed nerves relaxed slightly. It seems like the two people in front of me are really my allies, but why? Thinking of this question, Luoya raised his head and revealed a puzzled expression. As if sensing the young man's doubts, the figure in heavy armor spoke again. Treader of the ancient will? What are you referring to? Ever since Luoya learned of the existence of the Sage Society of the Twilight, this was the first time he heard this word from someone in this era. The black-haired young man could imagine what it meant. That's right, we are the descendants of the Twilight Sage Guild. Under the light of the aurora and the sparkling fireworks, the affirmative words entered the black-haired young man's ears. While he was shocked, he also sighed. Luoya had such a conjecture for a long time, but as he investigated the Philosophers' Association, he couldn't find anything. This contradiction made him suspect that he had guessed wrongly, but today, William's words proved his conjecture right. Are you the descendants of the members of the Twilight Sage Society? How could he prove this? You should know that in this era, not only friends but also enemies know this name. Chapter 360. Inside the room, the black-haired boy and the pink-haired girl were both stunned when the figure in heavy armor spoke with a serious tone. I'm sorry. What do you mean by joining? The Dawn Council. Luoya thought when he heard the name of William's organization, but he didn't answer. His golden eyes looked at Williams in front of him, and he couldn't help but have a feeling in his heart. Although Luoya basically treated Williams and the others as his own people when he confirmed their identities, but even if they were relatives, it would take a few days for them to get familiar with each other. How long has it been since they met? They haven't even established a relationship of trust, and he suddenly said that he wanted to join an organization, as if he knew that his question was a little abrupt, or he realized that his introduction wasn't detailed enough. Williams was a little anxious. He thought for a moment and added, "The Dawn Council is not an organization that randomly recruits members. Instead, it has a referral system and strict examinations. However, for the descendants of the Wise Ones, the process is simplified. As for you as an awakened of the Akkad family, you are qualified to join the council directly." Williams explained and said his thoughts. However, Roja, who knew the truth, couldn't help but smile bitterly. Or rather, even if the person who opened this barrier was someone he didn't know, Luoya would still barge in. But of course, he wouldn't say that out loud. In the end, how should he politely refuse? Luoya? The sound of searching for Luoya came with the wind and gradually became louder. The three people in the room paused simultaneously. The black-haired boy tilted his head and looked out of the window. He didn't expect the battle to end so quickly. Luoya, who thought of the reason, came back to his senses. He turned around and looked at the messy room and Williams, who was in front of him. He immediately thought of a solution to this somewhat awkward situation. I'm very interested in the Dawn Council you mentioned, but as the acting lord of Akkad territory, I can't make such a decision easily. I think it's better for us to discuss this matter further. What do you think? What's going on? Is there something wrong with what I said? Sorry, we don't want to have too much contact with the outside world for the time being. Luoya couldn't help but stare blankly at the words in Teresa's notebook. Williams was silent for a long time before he spoke again. Can't trust? You mean Nua Iyer and the others? I was indeed too excited just now. It's normal for you to be confused when I suddenly invited you. Just pretend that I didn't say those words before. But don't worry, we'll meet again soon. The heavy-armored man said and gently saluted. Before Roja could react, he put his hand on the shoulder of the pink-haired girl. Teresa held the book in one hand and gently waved at Roja with the other. Then she spoke for the first time since they met. Wait, you guys. The space spell was a rare spell that almost didn't exist in Shia. How could it be activated with just one sentence? Such a thought flashed through Luoya's mind. What followed was a sudden explosion of light unique to the transfer spell. The black-haired boy couldn't help but cover his eyes with his hand. After a few seconds, the light weakened. Luoya slowly lowered his hand. Under the moonlight in the room, Williams and Teresa's figures had disappeared. Chapter 361. Luoya? That's great, you're fine. Asya Lot, you're here. Is the battle over? The reddish-brown-haired girl stared into the depths of the room where Luoya was staring and blinked her eyes in confusion. Feeling Xia Luo's confusion, Luoya thought for a moment, but didn't say anything. Nothing. I'm just curious why there's a barrier around this room. Maybe it's a hotel rented by some big shot. He's probably watching the aurora in the Blessing Square, haha. It had to be said that the deterioration of the competitive environment had brought about an inward-looking effect. In this era where there was only one sweet spot, the girls would resort to all means to win, and they were becoming more and more unscrupulous. 1 second, remember this encounter with Williams and the others was a complete accident for Luoya, but in general, The advantages outweighed the disadvantages. At least it allowed him to obtain a lot of information in advance that he didn't know before. Although a worldwide crisis that could be labeled as such hadn't appeared yet, having an organization to deal with it was naturally better than not having one. However, what made Luoyu a little concerned was William's identity. The reason why the Twilight Sage Society was so strong was that it was an organization that transcended the concept of a country. Everyone's actions were for the benefit of the entire human race, and even the intelligent life groups. At times like this, everyone's cohesiveness and purpose would be very strong, and the power that erupted would be very concentrated. Luoyu felt that this was an important reason why they could overcome crises one after another. Luoyu didn't know the answer to this question, but he felt that this possibility existed, and it was very likely. Unless the royal family of the Kingdom of Knights, Pender, was selfless, it was inevitable that public resources would be used for private purposes. Moreover, their attitude of not wanting to come into contact with outsiders was very strange. In the game Eye of the Recorder, there weren't any members of the protagonist's team in the encirclement of Luoyu, only the male and female protagonists. This led to his main focus for so many years on Nua Ire and the others, and basically didn't spend any effort on other people. Combining the game and reality, the teenager who understood William's actions sighed at the cowardice of the original Luoyu, but then he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. He suddenly remembered that before leaving, the armored warrior said that they would meet again soon. I admit that I was a little too hasty. Based on our previous interactions, he seems to be a person who is cautious about joining an organization. Yes, but originally, I thought that he had a chance to directly agree, but he failed. The feeling he gave me was a little different from what I had imagined. I can't describe it, but I feel like it conflicts with my ideals. Maybe it's just my imagination. This chance encounter with Luoyu Akit was undoubtedly an unexpected situation. But this kind of encounter also had its advantages, and that was that both sides could see each other's true intentions without much preparation. Defining others based on your imagination, and then being disappointed because they don't fit is not a good thing. Chapter 362. In the ruins of the Abbeville mansion, Luoyu Akit was pondering over a mathematical problem of the century amidst the clamor of soldiers and the roars of war bears. The black-haired young man was engrossed in his thoughts. Behind him, the young ladies were in a mess. On the night of the silver moon after the aurora vanished, a silver-haired young lady pointed at the charred corpse of a cultist and questioned indignantly. The blonde young lady stood before her with a calm expression. She glanced at the corpse that Ai Lizzie pointed at, and retorted calmly, "You think it's yours just because you say so? What a joke. You used a sword to slash it? Then you should let your sword speak. I should be the one saying that to you. We killed that director named Francis, so it's only natural that we get the most credit." On the other side of the ruins, Nua Ire and Ai Lizzie were arguing over the issue of battle merits. The red-haired young lady was busy settling the bill for Duke Abbeville. Lillian was inspecting the corpse at the side, and Luoyu was having a headache. As competitors, the girls naturally did not trust others. Therefore, the task of recording the results of the battle had been assigned to the four camps. However, the problem was that after the battle ended, the total number of enemies killed by the four camps was 77. However, the total number of enemies killed was only 69, including Francis, who had been blown into ashes. The moment this universal problem appeared, Luoyu knew that things would be difficult. And the facts proved it. After the battle ended, Nua Ire and Ai Lizzie, who didn't have anything else to settle, started arguing. The other two young ladies probably did the same after settling their own matters. "Luoyu, come here for a moment." Upon hearing Lillian's call, Luoyu strode over after being taken aback for a moment. Nua Ire and Ai Lizzie, who were arguing, looked at each other and stopped arguing as well. The three of them arrived at Lillian's side with one in front and two behind. They found that the Royal Highness was looking down at a corpse on the ground. Luoyu felt a chill in his heart when he saw Lillian looking down at the cultist. He thought that Lillian wanted him to judge the prize, but he didn't expect that after approaching, he found that Lillian's expression was very solemn. She didn't seem like she was going to protest at all. The black-haired young man heaved a sigh of relief when he realized that Lillian didn't seem to want to quarrel. Then, he observed the unsightly male corpse on the ground. Luoya scanned the corpse in front of him carefully, and realized that this was the conclusion he could draw. But the black-haired young lady spoke with an unpleasant expression. Similar? How can the bloodline of our family have? Wait. Holy emissaries were a very special group of people in the Saint Heroes Society. They had a lofty status, but they did not necessarily have strong strength. One of the great significance of their existence was to be the key to open the so-called Holy Artifact in the Saint Heroes Society. 400 years ago, Leinster was the Wind Summoner's egg that had been absorbed by Luoya. Could it be that the so-called Holy Emissaries were actually artificially cultivated people with similar bloodline to the Akot family? This possibility does exist, but the bloodline of the Akot family is too special. What method is used? Hearing the young lady's question, Luoya didn't know how to explain for a while, but he understood one thing. That was, the so-called special curse vessel was definitely problematic. He remembered that the information of the Saint Heroes Society mentioned that it was similar to blood. So the source of this blood, Nuwa Iyer and Ai Lizzie didn't know the current situation, and seemed a little confused. It wasn't until the reddish-haired young lady came over that Luoya ended his contemplation, and the atmosphere eased. No, it's nothing. Xiaoluot, how are the casualties on your side? Xiaoluot, who strolled over, said and glanced at Lillian coldly. Luoya, who wanted to change the atmosphere, couldn't help but be stunned. He suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. As if confirming his guess, the black-haired young lady frowned when she heard Xiaoluot's words. She thought for a moment, and after a moment, she curled the corner of her mouth and spoke back. What did you say? After seeing Aurora and defeating the cultist, Luoya, who was exposed, had no reason to stay in Aberville. Leaving was a matter of course, but just like the previous quarrel, where to go was a problem. In addition, the young ladies also discussed the allocation of time. Nuwa Iyer, who was at the bottom because she couldn't grab the kill, proposed such a statement to reverse the situation. However, this idea was fiercely resisted by Ai Lizzie, who had the credit of killing Francis. But that's what you said. What if my dear doesn't want to follow the first place? Hee, Ai Lizzie, do you still want to force him? What's the difference between that and the Austin kidnapper? Oh, who knows? Can your words be trusted? Are you kidding me? How can my brother not want to go home? No, my dear, you obviously want to go back to Rose with me. I'm officially hired. Don't you think so? My dear. Old woman, that's enough. My brother will definitely choose me. Isn't that right, my dear brother? Luoya's face stiffened as he looked at the young ladies who were gradually focusing on him. His strong desire to live made him feel as if he was standing on the edge of a cliff. Just when he was at his wit's end, the familiar fluctuation of the spell appeared again. Remaining use, 0. This is. Before the young ladies could finish their exclamations, Luoya's body had returned to normal. The familiar feeling of power once again descended upon him, and his brain felt much clearer. Holding the blessed ear of wheat that had lost its effect, the black-haired young man was very excited. Now he could finally answer the young ladies' questions. Under the night sky, Luoya looked at the young ladies who were still in shock. Just like before, the corner of his mouth curled up and said calmly and gently, I'm going back to Leinster. I'm going back to Leinster. It's time for class. Chapter 363. Father, why do I have to wear these things? Armor. That was something a child of this age would naturally not like. Moreover, this kind of armor was accompanied by a certain degree of pain. It was natural for her to want to take it off. Very simple. According to the ancient prophecy of the Three Races Alliance, there may be a great calamity in the future. As the successor, you must obtain great power and hide your identity as much as possible. This armor was designed for this purpose. The man's answer was solemn and serious, but to the child's ears, it was no different than usual. The thin and weak child sadly lowered her head and said with a choked voice, You don't need to play, those noises will only weaken you. You only need to become strong. Silence once again filled the hall. as if feeling that his attitude was too harsh. After a moment, the man walked down from the throne, sighed and opened his mouth to explain. Oath. In other words, as long as I persevere until they reappear, it will be fine. The man pondered for a moment, reached out his hand and stroked the child's head and smiled. In the dreamscape formed by the memories of the distant past, a name that had been forgotten for many years suddenly lingered in her ears, causing the sleeping girl to abruptly open her eyes and wake up with a start. Why did she suddenly think of her childhood? Was it because she took off her armor today? No, it's rare to take off my armor. I should have slept better. Is there a problem with my body? It was a healthy and beautiful body that had obviously undergone sufficient training. Slender and straight legs, a slim waist without any excess fat, a full chest and a snow-white neck. At the top of the mirror, what was reflected was a dazzling and beautiful yet strangely dignified face. Draconic aura. This was the symbol of the royal family of knights with dragon blood hidden in her small body. The Khanate family. It was also one of the things that the girl had hidden from the public for many years. But regarding this characteristic of her family, Wilhelmina had always been quite fond of it. But unlike the usual William who exuded a suffocating and dignified aura, after revealing her face, Wilhelmina's temperament as a young girl underwent some changes. Under the draconic aura, it was no longer oppressive and terrifying, but inviolable and noble. Wilhelmina checked her body that was almost perfect because of the dragon's blood. She found nothing. Frustrated, she walked back to her bed and lay down. She had to face the last possibility in her mind. Wilhelmina's heartbeat quickened as she recalled the young man she met under the northern aurora a while ago. She had to admit that the handsome Luoya would have a certain impact on any woman. Even Wilhelmina, who had always treated herself as a man, found it hard to escape. She even hastily sent out an invitation because of that. This time, I can't mess it up again. In the preparation room, a black-haired youth in formal attire was sitting on a chair, trembling as he looked at the letter that the Nua Iyer and Xia Luot had received. Around him, the two youths who were deputy heads of the consulting department were trembling. After reading back and forth twice, Luoya Akat slowly stopped trembling. He raised his head and asked the two candidates in front of him softly with a smile. Hearing his words, the two suspects completely stopped pretending and began to drag each other down. Hearing Luoya's accusation, the dog-headed strategist Geralt slapped his thigh. His expression turned extremely sorrowful in a few seconds. He shook his head and sighed. Squeezing out the tears in his eyes, he said to Luoya. The gray-haired youth said so, sorrowfully and innocently, like a wronged ghost who was dragged into a car. But seeing him like this, Paul Ackman was dumbfounded. Is this a noble? How despicable and shameless. Paul Ackman, who had his hands dirted by Geralt, was stunned for a long time before he finally regained his senses. He turned around and put the blame on Geralt's head. He also revealed the theory of the gray-haired youth to the public. Following Paul's counterattack, the scapegoat competition between the two sides officially began. You wrote it yourself. You were the one who threw the mailbox. When did I say that they absconded to avoid punishment? Why are you slandering people out of thin air? That's elopement. How can it be called avoiding punishment? Luoya, who had been listening for a long time, couldn't help but interrupt the two clowns in front of him. He looked at the two people who were silent after hearing his words, thought for a moment and sighed helplessly. It was human nature to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. When there was a problem, the two didn't pretend to be indifferent. Instead, they actively acted to help Luoya. There was no doubt that there was a decisive difference, especially when the problem was the elopement of the Austin Empire's princess and Luoya. This was a big deal, and it was definitely not good to get involved. Fortunately, Luoya and the others came back early. If they came back later, Paul would be ready to carry out the so-called Plan B. By then, the matter of him and Lillian eloping and having a child would be widely spread, and it would become an established fact. It would probably be as noisy as the Jiangnan leather factory. The black-haired youth thought for a moment, looked at the two youths and said softly, "Hey, clean up." Hearing Luoya's punishment, after sighing, Paul and Jellic were taken aback. They obviously didn't expect the punishment to be so light. The black-haired youth raised his eyebrows and said with a weird expression, No, I think cleaning up is good. Listening to the two clowns, Luoya shook his head helplessly. He stood up and walked to the door under the gaze of the two. Luoya said and opened the door. The next moment, cheers and applause from the outside poured into the room. In the wave of voices, the black-haired youth turned his head and looked at the two stunned people with a smile. After all, tonight belongs to us. Chapter 364. Tonight, Luoya Akate, Paul Ackman, and Gerlach Stevenson welcomed their first night in St. Freya Academy. Dean Antonio, whose white beard was almost touching the ground, was in high spirits. He wore a white robe with golden threads that he would only wear during a grand ceremony. He stood in the center of the auditorium and spoke to the students. In the face of such a report from an unknown source, Luoya Akate, Paul Ackman, and Gerlach Stevenson didn't ignore it. Instead, they used it as a clue and worked hard to find out the truth. They also joined forces with the security department, which was still in conflict at that time, to observe for several days and successfully destroy the hidden cultist organization in the academy. As soon as Dean Antonio finished his words, the auditorium immediately erupted in thunderous applause. Luoya, Paul, and Gerlach exchanged smiles and stepped onto the stage. That's right. Senior Lillian actually smiled. Such exclamations spread among the students of the Austin Empire, which made those who heard some rumors couldn't help but suspect the relationship between Lillian and Luoya. On the other side of the stage, a black-haired, blue-eyed young lady in a formal dress held a box in her hand and waited for Luoya. Luoya, Paul, and Gerlach walked to the front of the stage and lined up in a row. Dean Antonio personally presented the medal to the latter two, while Luoya, who was at the front, had the medal pinned on his chest by Melty, whom he had personally rescued. No, this is what I should do. Protecting an upright and kind person like you and maintaining order in the academy is my responsibility as a preceptor. Sir Luoya, I'm from the Austin Empire. Can I join the Blue Rose faction? Upon hearing Melty's request, Luoya smiled and replied. The young lady was touched. The girl said with tears in her eyes. The next moment, she stood on her tiptoes and kissed Roja's cheek under the watchful eyes of everyone. Oh. Although it was permissible for a lady to kiss on such an occasion, it still required a lot of courage for an Austinite to do so. Therefore, Luoya wouldn't avoid it even if he knew about it. Otherwise, he would become a fool who embarrassed the lady. In terms of publicity, this kind of behavior could also play a positive role. The award ceremony came to an end with Luoya and the other two as the finale. However, the enthusiasm of the students in the audience was even higher than before, because it was not the end of the ceremony, but the celebration banquet organized by St. Freya Academy, which was one of the reasons why many people came here. Such a luxurious store lineup could be considered a gourmet exhibition. It was too attractive for foodies, especially for a certain black-haired young man. Walking along the corridor leading to the banquet hall, Luoya Akate looked at the excited students rushing to the rows of tables. He tried his best to suppress his desire to eat. Nua Iyer, who knew him well, couldn't help but laugh. On the other side, Xiao Luot also tried hard not to laugh. Hey, you're a prince after all. Can you not be so embarrassing? This is Vivian's Surprise Restaurant's Rainbow Truffle Roast Chicken. Chapter 365. In the noisy banquet hall, while the students held their plates and focused their attention on the envelopes slowly falling from the sky, the black-haired Her Royal Highness had quietly approached her target. Looking at the sweet cake on the fork in front of him, the black-haired young man was shocked. He didn't expect that Lillian would dare to do this after returning to the academy. It was the clear will of Emperor Lucas to forbid Lillian from contacting the members of the Akate family. Although it was still unknown why His Majesty issued this ban, there was no doubt that Lillian, as the Royal Highness, had to abide by it. At least, she couldn't take the initiative to contact them too obviously, let alone this kind of behavior that would expose her intimate relationship. Luoya, who was aware of Lillian's intention, was about to refuse, but before he finished speaking, Paul Ackman suddenly walked over. The young man held the plate and blocked the scene of the two making contact. Luoya was stunned for a while. Listening to Lillian's urging and looking at Paul's back, Luoya was stunned for a while. Worried that others would see him, he could only lean over and suck Lillian's fork in his mouth, then quickly return to his original position. As for the black-haired girl, she walked past the young man as if nothing had happened. The two just brushed past each other as if nothing had happened. Seeing that no one noticed Lillian's behavior, the black-haired young man breathed a sigh of relief, but when he turned his head to look at the girl leaving, he couldn't help blushing. Sure enough, Sister Royal should still be with Brother Luoya. Paul, I hope you can help me maintain the basic contact with Luoya in the academy. The ace agent of the Luoya x Lillian fan club, Paul Aikman, encouraged himself in his heart, thinking about how to create good results in the future. On the other hand, Nua Ayer and Xia Luo were gnashing their teeth. Damn it! That woman actually found such a helper by Luoya's side. How despicable! Although Luoya had a good temper, it wasn't that he couldn't get angry. In fact, he was usually very dignified. The last time the three girls fought in rows, they stopped because they were afraid that he would be angry. It was only when he was younger that the girls dared to do whatever they wanted. Why is it suddenly so cold? Favorability plus 80, plus 50, plus 20, plus 40, plus 110. Once upon a time, Luoya had looked down on things like favorability points. After all, favorability points were different from things that could make one stronger after exchanging for gold coins. It seemed that favorability points were only useful for developing territories. However, after experiencing the battle with the Saint Heroes Society and the dispute between the girls, a divine artifact had changed Luoya's perception. In this award ceremony, the actions of Luoya and the other two were made known to the public. After knowing what they had done to punish evil and promote good, the students in the audience naturally felt admiration, approval, and other emotions. And after seeing Luoya receive the award, they yearned for it and yearned for it. Director, thank you. No, I should be the one thanking you. In the end, this is the result of everyone's hard work. Chapter 366. Half a month ago, not long after Luoya's body recovered, a familiar yet special experience made him relive the nightmare that he had almost forgotten. That was the second time he saw that pair of beautiful but cold eyes after a year. When that pair of eyes looked at him across time and space, Luoya's body turned cold, and his heart seemed to stop. He only woke up when she left. Of course, there was no such thing as love or hatred for no reason in this world. Luoya wasn't surprised that he was targeted by the Mother Goddess. After all, it was because he had absorbed the power of the oracles. However, it had to be said that being watched by the gods gave Luoya a lot of pressure and trouble. That was the problem of ancestor Estrella. One of the clues was the guardian Antonio who survived the war, and the other was the artificial elf Margaret. As Luoya had only returned for a short period of time, he hadn't contacted the two parties yet. However, Luoya was sure that they didn't have any good ideas. After so many years, there was still no news of the scholar. The only possibility was that things were out of his expectations. This was also the reason why Luoya used the goddess of fate's advice. Under the influence of these two forces, Luoya set this goal for himself. As he silently chanted his wish, the blessing in the system was successfully activated. Activation successful. Blessing effective. Ding. It's that easy to obtain? But what kind of advice was it? Goddess of Fate's advice. Time limit, 10 seconds. Looking at the first effect of the Goddess of Fate's advice, Luoya Akit was stunned. Is your but an auspicious sign? It's the blessing of the Goddess of Fate. You can't just spout nonsense. Thinking of this, Luoya took a step forward. He took a deep breath, lowered his waist and extended his leg. In the next moment he shot a powerful shot at Paul Ackman's buttocks. Paul, whose chrysanthemum was suddenly attacked, was dumbfounded. He only had time to let out a short scream before he was kicked away by a powerful force. The scream of being strangled was not noticed by the music and the noise of the crowd. However, the scene of Luoya kicking Paul fell into the eyes of the two girls. The black-haired boy didn't know that his actions had unknowingly eliminated the anger in the hearts of the two girls in the distance, thus resolving a small crisis. At this time, Luoya was observing Paul's parabola, trying to figure out how the goddess of fate's advice would affect the goal he set. Such doubts arose in the young man's mind. Under his gaze, Paul dashed toward the crowd ahead. At this time, at the end of the crowd, the old man with a white beard, Antonio, was chatting with the scholars of the school with a serious expression. They were discussing the problem of the Challenger Cup that was held once every few years in Leinster. Every Challenger Cup tournament could be said to be an unprecedented grand event. The impact on the students in the academy was immeasurable. If using the student sports in Luoya's previous life as an analogy, it was somewhat similar to a certain island country's baseball quotient. But in Shia, in the country of scholars, the Challenger Cup's impact was even greater. After all, in terms of scope, if a sport like baseball was based on all the citizens of a certain island country, then spells in Shia were based on the entire human world. And the winner of the fierce spell tournament only represented one thing, and that was strength. In the process, they would burn blood and tears, exhaust their wisdom and courage, and use everything they had to challenge the one and only throne. And the winner would also receive unimaginable fame and wealth. Originally, according to the rules of the previous years, the first years who had no actual combat experience were not allowed to participate. However, the internal and external environment this year was different. Whether to stick to the rules or to break through and innovate, this was a difficult choice, even for these high-level administrators. Seeing that the long discussion was fruitless, Antonio, who was stroking his beard, suggested. However, he did not expect that before his voice died away, a figure had already rushed toward him. At the critical moment, Paul Aikman's figure flashed and descended from the sky. Chapter 367. This year's first-year students were a little unusual. This was something that Dean Antonio had long known. To have so many students that required his attention in one batch was extremely rare, even in Antonio's hundreds of years of teaching experience. And the absence of all these talents who had the potential to become the golden generation was undoubtedly a huge regret. Dean. So that's why, did he hear our conversation? Indeed, for Paul, as an illegitimate child, the Challengers Cup was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to prove his worth. It was no wonder he was so excited. Paul Aikman, you want to give us some suggestions, right? It's okay, don't be nervous. As one of the main characters of this banquet, you have the right to voice your opinion. I'm not. Paul, if you don't participate this time, will you have any regrets? This is interviewing my feelings on crusading against the cult. So that's why, these people I don't know are probably outsiders. They might even be the higher-ups of the other Leinster academies. So, this is a competition between the academies? The dean wants to use us to boost his momentum? Got it. Bragging, I can do it. Regret. I'll regret it for life. But you have to know as first years there's a certain degree of danger for you to participate. Sigh, the youngsters these days are really something. Listening to the words of the elders, Paul was even more certain of his guess. On the other side, Antonio looked at Paul with eyes full of admiration. The old man smiled and continued to ask, Rivals from the upper years? Security department? Although we're not as strong as the upper years, we have experience guidance. We can defeat the enemy through experience. Chapter 368. The Challengers Cup wasn't important in the original game, Recorder's Eye. So, under the goddess of fate's advice, using Paul's but to change the reality that was different from the game, how could it help save Estrella and avoid the crisis? On the other hand, if the first years were allowed to participate, as one of the ring-bearers, Luoya would definitely participate in the Challengers Cup. Even if it was according to the ranking of the first years in the school, he would definitely participate in the Challengers Cup, because he was the third in the ranking of the first years. As for why he was third, it was mainly because he couldn't touch the first two. From the beginning of the preliminaries, Luoya's opponents all forfeited without exception. Those who didn't know would think that it was a rigged match. Against Nua Iyer, not to mention the difference between the monarch and his minister, Luoya couldn't bring himself to do it. But it was worth mentioning that Nua Iyer met Xia Luod in the finals. The match was quite fierce, and in the end, Xiao Luo admitted defeat when he was at a disadvantage. Both sides stopped at a certain point. Minister, the magma milk ice cream is almost gone. Are you sure you don't want to try one? Looking at Gerlach, who was holding the ice cream that looked like a volcano model, Luoya couldn't help but be slightly stunned. The next moment, his expression changed and he rushed to the cold drink area. Thinking so, the teenager temporarily gave up thinking for the sake of food and began to taste the delicious food. The banquet gradually came to an end in a happy atmosphere. An hour later, in the teacher's dormitory area of St. Freya Academy, Luoya walked alone on the wide road. His final destination was a beautiful two-story building in this area. And the owner was the only teacher Luoya was close to and his pending relative, mentor Chris. It had been several days since he returned from the north, and Luoya's life had returned to the happy and peaceful track. He bid farewell to the death threat of the King of Curses, and bid farewell to the aurora and snow of Aberville. However, there was one person that Luoya didn't bid farewell to, and that was Ai Lizzie. It was Ai Lizzie's righteousness to examine Chris's character and conduct here. This was because once Luoya objected, it would be equivalent to not treating Ai Lizzie as a family member and rejecting her as an adopted daughter. This was something that Luoya, who was very concerned about Ai Lizzie's feelings, could not do. Moreover, as one of the core members of Akate Territory's intelligence work, Ai Lizzie did indeed have the authority to verify the authenticity of the information. Ever since then, Ai Lizzie had moved into Chris's house and refused to leave. Normally, he would take the time to visit her, but today, my bed is broken. Take her to your place. Chris, this short sentence made Luoya speechless. In fact, he had been thinking about a problem along the way. Luoya gently knocked on the door of the two-story building in front of him. Chris, who opened the door, smiled when he saw Luoya. He held his forehead and sighed. Sorry, the banquet just ended. You did a great job this time. Thanks to you, I even have more content to write to you. This. While Chris was stuttering from Luoya's question, a silver-white figure suddenly rushed out of the room and threw herself into the youth's arms, interrupting Luoya's questioning. Big brother, I missed you so much. Looking at the girl who was excitedly rubbing against his chest like a small animal, Roha's heart began to overflow with pampering. He didn't say anything about it. Looking at the two of them who were so in love with each other, Chris couldn't help but smile. Chris smelled the sweetness and smiled ambiguously. On the other side, Ai Lizzie secretly made a gesture that everything was going well. But for a teacher, this problem didn't exist. Chris's teacher's dormitory was a standalone building. After his family and friends registered, they could move in. Therefore, the current situation was that Ai Lizzie held the right to send letters to the Akate family, while Chris held the right to stay in St. Freya Academy. After thanking Chris for taking care of Ai Lizzie, the black-haired youth waved goodbye to the young girl. The two of them walked along the road towards Tsang's hall. But what the youth didn't know was that at the same time, in front of St. Freya Academy's gate, a luxurious carriage with a sword and shield emblem slowly came to a stop. The tall coachman raised a document and loudly announced the name of the person who came. Kingdom of Knights, Connaught family, open the door. Chapter 369. There's a carriage in the middle of the night? Late at night, St. Freya Academy was no longer as noisy as it was during the day. The whole neighborhood was quiet, and the loud carriage was too conspicuous. Of course, it attracted the boy's attention. But what Luoya didn't know was that while he was looking at the carriage, the person in the carriage was also looking at him. In that brief moment, the armored figure in the carriage noticed Luoya. She stood up abruptly, but before she could stop the carriage, the scene she saw made her dispel the idea. Was it a little inappropriate? That girl was his adopted sister. But she remembered that students were not allowed to bring their family members. William stopped at this point. The teaching staff went forward and respectfully knocked on the door. After a slightly dull knock, the old man's voice came from the room. When the old man's voice responded, the door lock automatically opened, and Williams walked in. Antonio's closed eyes slowly opened, and looked at the girl in front of him who was wrapped in an inexplicable majesty. Honorable Sir Antonio, my father is doing well, thank you for your concern. As Antonio spoke, he couldn't help but sigh softly as he recalled the past. Hundreds of years had passed. He had once witnessed the calamity of life, and he was about to witness a new cycle of reincarnation. The smoke and dust of history had passed, but most of his old friends were no longer around. Williams fell into silence as he sensed the deeper meaning behind Antonio's words. The accompanying staff members quietly left the room after the two started their conversation. After the door closed, the young lady finally spoke again. Duty? Hee. It seems that he is very strict with your education. So Williams, this time you suddenly came to St. Freya Academy. Is there anything I can help you with? Transfer school? The Kingdom of Knights has its own academy. You are? I remember. There is a report on Luoya Akat from my side, right? Looking at Williams, the white-haired old man was unmoved, but he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Luoya Akat. This was the bloodline awakener of the ancient family after hundreds of years. As the founder of the Twilight Sage Society, his appearance had attracted the attention of the remaining forces of the Sage Society and the hidden families since a few years ago. But because he had been living in seclusion, there were only speculations and rumors at that time. Originally, Antonio should have used his identity as a middleman to introduce Luoya into the circle of the Kingdom of Knights, and let him enter the eyes of the hidden families, let the shadow eagle of the ancient Austin Empire soar again, and let the King of the Darkness regain his glory. But as of now his understanding of Luoya, Antonio's thoughts gradually changed. And another more important reason was that Luoya Akat showed Antonio a brand new possibility. With this young man as the center, the people gathered around him had unknowingly formed a mysterious force. This force was so huge that it had even reached the point where it could influence the world to a certain extent, and it was still growing rapidly. And what shocked Antonio the most was their response to the crisis. In this process, the hatred of the country was put aside, and the conflicts between religions were also put aside. For the same goal, they worked together at that moment. This scene was simply a miracle for Antonio, who was used to seeing the internal division of humans. Since the Great Migration, the various forces of the human world had never gathered around one person like this. If this force were to fully mature, looking at Williams, who was waiting for his answer, Antonio pondered for a moment and slowly opened his mouth. Yes, but I have a condition. Chapter 370. I say, Ai Lizzie, can you explain why you're in my bed? Old Sama is awake. Good morning. Don't you think you've been using this trick too much recently? Ai Lizzie, don't think you can get away with it. After the two returned to Tsang Hall yesterday, Luoya decided to give his bed to Ai Lizzie in order to let her sleep comfortably, while he himself stayed in an empty room on the second floor for the night. Without a doubt, as a dormitory that hasn't been used yet, the condition of the empty room is definitely not very good. This move is completely Luoya's behavior of spoiling his sister. Old Sama, I'm not familiar with the bed. Although that room is good, I can't sleep. The bed is indeed not good, but Old Sama, I'm familiar with it. Looking at Ai Lizzie, who said so with a smile, Luoya pointed at the girl for a long time without saying anything. He could only give up and sigh helplessly in his heart. The black-haired boy sat on the bed and looked into the distance. He felt that this was completely different from the plan he made a few years ago to let Ai Lizzie become more and more independent as she grew older. As for Ai Lizzie herself, he didn't have the slightest intention of alienating her as she grew older. The deviation from the past expectations and reality made the boy a little skeptical of life, but this didn't stop the girl from hugging his arm and rubbing against it. After helplessly stopping Ai Lizzie's further offensive, the two washed up and went to the small dining room to have breakfast. It's just that it's worth mentioning that because of Lillian, Ai Lizzie was extremely hostile to Paul, who was also an Archimon, making Paul restless and helpless. He ate with trepidation. Later, Luoya specifically chatted with Ai Lizzie and told her about Paul's situation. Only then did she ease up. Of course, not looking for trouble is not looking for trouble, but when eating, she still has to sit far away. Don't even think about looking good. But this is probably the limit of what the girl can do. Minister Miss Ai Lizzie, good morning. Looking at the young man with dark circles under his eyes like a national treasure in his previous life, Luoya raised his eyebrows and looked puzzled. And opposite Garak, Paul also had the demeanor of an immortal, and stood out from the crowd. He smiled and said good morning to Luoya. Noticing the state of the two, Rohan naturally asked for the reason. Behind him, Elisa also stuck out her small head with a puzzled expression. So, under the two's questioning, they heard the reason for the two's ascension, which was to revise for the exam. The mathematics curriculum in St. Freya's Academy was extremely difficult. It had already surpassed the average level of Leinster University. Facts had proven that no matter which world one was in, mathematics was a nightmare for some people. For Paul, who had not received much education since he was young, it was simply a disaster. Then the intensive tutoring began. As a result, after a night of tutoring, Paul was fine, but Jellic was going crazy. The reason was very simple. Isn't that great? So what about now? Chapter 371. Why do you suddenly want everyone to participate in this? This is not my wish. It's the request of the Dean Antonio. That's right. Last night, Williams, who was the fastest to travel, went to meet with the Dean of St. Freya's Academy and former member of the Twilight Sage Association, Antonio. This action was originally intended to gain his support. However, what the young lady did not expect was that Antonio did not seem to want them to affect Luoya Akit too much. He even requested for them to transfer schools. As a result, the number of students transferred from St. Fran's Academy in the country of knights increased greatly. Teresa was naturally one of them. However, the young lady was not happy about this situation. Instead, she was deeply worried. Therefore, the so-called hidden families were not some heroes living in seclusion in a village. They did not live a miserable life. On the contrary, most of them were famous nobles in Pender, the country of knights. As for why they wanted to hide their bloodline, the reason was very simple. Many of the hidden families' bloodline came from other races. While they had great strength, there were also drawbacks. However, what if the bloodline was unstable, had drawbacks, and even violated some of the public morals and common sense of mankind? Under such a comparison of benefits and risks, many families with other races' bloodline began to keep their own situation a secret. Thus the hidden families were formed. After the Third Era, when Ald was divided into 7 glorious families, without a leader, they began to gradually close themselves off. They became active only in their own circle, and this circle was the country of knights. Knowing little about the outside world would easily lead to arrogance. One of the results of this situation among the younger generation was that many members of the Dawn Club in St. Fran's Academy were not ordinary problem children, but super problem children. In the meeting room with the curtains drawn, both sides of the long table were already full. Including Williams, there were a total of 7 people. However, unlike the usual quiet and serious meetings of the mysterious organization, this meeting was unusually noisy. How troublesome. On one side of the table, among the 7 people, a short brown-haired young lady said as she narrowed her eyes. The murderous intent in her eyes could not be concealed. Hearing her words, the black-haired, red-eyed young lady on the other side of the table was stunned for a moment before she happily agreed. Right. That's the former leader's family. If they want to lead us or something, isn't it natural that they are stronger than us? Then the simplest way is to fight, right? Looking at the brown-haired girl, Williams said in a heavy tone. But after hearing her words, the brown-haired girl named Selena didn't remain silent. Instead, she widened her eyes that were shining brightly in the darkness. The combat prowess of that clan's awakened is known to all throughout history. Moreover, just the fact that they're awakened from the Akot clan is enough to make them qualified to lead us. Their previous clan, the Arde clan, had many achievements. Juliana squinted and licked her lips, interrupting Williams and caressing her cheeks. Upon hearing her words, the Pender nobles began to get restless. Haha, you're right. If that's the case, we might as well make our move during the school transfer ceremony. Kill him, or... Chapter 372. At the breakfast table, The news published in the newspaper shocked everyone except Ai Lizzie. After all, as a student of St. Freya Academy, Luoya and the others still knew some of the most basic things. The country of knights was the representative of the physical side of supernatural powers. It was the place where martial arts schools gathered. It had its own St. Fran Academy, and had very little interaction with St. Freya Academy. There were not many students who entered the academy from there. As for transfer students, it was unheard of. However, under such circumstances, there was more than one transfer student in the country of knights. Luoya naturally thought of Williams and the others. But from the sudden appearance of the goddess of fate's words, this matter seemed to be related to Gurok. It was the plot of a noble from the country of knights named Brittany who transferred to St. Freya Academy to capture her fiancé, Gurok. After this plot, Brittany would join the main character team. But originally, this plot should have happened much later. After all, Gurok lived a very low-key life here. Under the circumstances where he concealed his identity, no one would be able to find him for a while. But now, it's nothing. Eat more. Looking at the doubtful military advisor Gurok, Luoya, who could roughly guess what would happen in the future, showed a caring expression on his face. He personally handed a piece of bread to Gurok. The youth who received the bread was confused. Somehow, he felt that the atmosphere of this breakfast had become strange. 1 second. Remember, good morning, Senior Lillian. Hearing Luoya's greeting, Lillian, who was still sitting in the front row, gave a faint reply. Her expression did not change, as if it was just a polite greeting. However, what outsiders did not notice was that after the greeting, the corner of the black-haired girl's mouth couldn't help but curl up. Her mood seemed to be better all of a sudden. By the way, have you guys seen today's school newspaper? My friend in the school newspaper said that this news was given by the dean. I heard that there will be something more important to announce in the afternoon assembly. The arrival of a transfer student, even if he came from the country of knights, shouldn't be important enough for the dean to send a message to the newspaper. Antonio's action gave Roja a feeling that he was reminding him, so that he could be prepared. The black-haired youth made up his mind. As Chris entered the classroom and started the class, the chatter between the students quickly ended. After a month, Luoya once again experienced the hardships of the Hell class. But this time, Luoya wasn't worried about the progress because Chris would give him more classes. Of course, as Christian's extra class was a formal procedure, it caused Lillian's teaching time to be greatly reduced. Lillian was naturally unhappy about it, but due to their identities, the black-haired girl couldn't voice out her grievances. It's really about the banquet, right? You are all favored by the goddess of fate. It was basically impossible for those who transferred from St. Fran Academy to St. Freya Academy to be nobles. After all, who would purposely transfer if they were comfortable in school? A soft sigh dissipated in the noise of the students. After lunch and a short rest, the first-year students began to gather in the auditorium. Luoya and the others entered this solemn building again after a night, but this time, they were the audience. Last time, Paul made Antonio and the others change their minds. What kind of reaction would his words cause this time? Chapter 373. When the 7-person team headed by William stepped onto the stage, the excited students who had yet to calm down gave a warm round of applause. All the students present, regardless of their gender, couldn't help but have curiosity in their eyes. Under such circumstances, the first-year students who were already excited couldn't help but feel excited. On the other hand, the transfer students who stepped onto the stage were indeed different. The girl with pink hair and pink eyes was gentle and cute. She had a smile on her face but didn't speak, Teresa. The tall and muscular man who didn't wear any armor, Gelt. The girl with black hair and rare red eyes, Juliana, who was wearing a lace aristocratic costume. When the 7 boys and girls with their own unique features appeared in front of the crowd, the students below the stage immediately began to whisper to each other's ears. Don't you think the blindfolded person is a little handsome? The girls clapped their hands and looked forward curiously. The boys were even more excited. They looked at the girls with unique clothes and couldn't help but comment. No, obviously the one with black hair is better. She has a very elegant temperament. The overly realistic thoughts blurted out, satisfying the curiosity of the students. However, in the audience, beside Luoya, the gray-haired boy's reaction was completely different from the other students. Looking at the golden-haired girl on the stage, Jellic's face turned pale, and he trembled like a sieve. He never thought that the transfer from the country of knights was not a student who couldn't stay there anymore, but a big noble of Pender. Among the 7 people present, except for Williams of the royal family, everyone was the heir of a great aristocratic family, especially Teresa and Brittany. Both of them were the daughters of the Duke's family. But this wasn't the main point. The main point was that Gerlach absolutely couldn't meet one of them. The gray-haired boy looked at the girl who was engaged to him on the stage. He covered his mouth with both hands and began to chant crazily in his heart. He tried his best to stop his body from trembling instinctively. At the same time, his mind sorted out a set of reasons why he didn't need to escape now. Looking around the crowd, Gerlach, who felt the sense of community security, breathed a sigh of relief. However, the young man didn't know that the nearby crowd might have provided him with a protective color, but these were far less dazzling than the bright lights around him. On the stage, Williams, who was dressed in heavy armor, looked at the crowd. Almost instantly, she made eye contact with the young man in the audience seats. Following the guidance of her aura, the other 6 people also found the target of their trip. Teresa waved her hand downwards and revealed a sweet smile in Luoya's direction. However, when she saw the gray-haired youth beside Luoya, she was slightly taken aback. For some inexplicable reason, she felt that he was somewhat familiar. The moment she remembered Garek's identity, the girl's pink eyes suddenly widened, but it was too late. Beside Teresa, the heroic blonde girl's body was already surrounded by a thick curse power, and she rushed out like a rocket with a roar. On the other hand, Jellic himself was dumbfounded when he saw the situation. Shortly after, he was scared out of his wits. He instinctively wanted to escape, but it was too late. Boom. It was a pair of golden, mysterious, and majestic eyes. The pupils were like candlelight that flickered with a radiance that could see through one's heart. They were indifferent as though they didn't contain any emotions, but they weren't as sinister as reptiles. Under the gaze of these eyes, the young lady's anger and resentment dissipated rapidly as though sealed in ice. The heavy pressure brought Brittany back to her senses. Realizing that she had lost her composure due to the influence of her bloodline, Brittany fell to the side while Jellic looked at his minister with gratitude. It was only at this moment that the students finally reacted. Amidst the screams, they scattered in all directions and distanced themselves from Luoya's group. What's going on? Revenge? It's Brittany who couldn't hold it in first. You can't blame me now, right? Hey, wait up. However, before the excited Selena and the joyful Juliana could challenge the young man who stood motionless, a holy, dazzling radiance and spatial ripples descended at the same time. As transfer students, you actually dared to attack the ring-bearers. How unbelievable! Can I interpret this as you challenging the authority of the ring-bearers? However, seeing them appear, Selena and the others didn't shrink back. At the same time, Williams and Teresa arrived one after the other. The armored man wanted to explain, but when he saw the 2 girls beside Roja, he fell into an inexplicable silence. The 2 sides looked at each other in silence. Only the aura of the curse grew stronger and stronger. On the seemingly forgotten ceremonial stage, the white-haired elder gazed at the 2 parties with a glint in his eyes. Chapter 374. Inside the auditorium, with the black-haired young man and the armored Williams as the center, the 2 major factions glared at each other with swords drawn. Outside the auditorium, Antonio remained silent as if he had turned invisible. The students who were watching the commotion were getting noisier and noisier. If it weren't for the goddess of fate's suggestion, Luoya would have had to accompany AI Lizzie for lunch today. As a result, he would have entered the auditorium alone. Correspondingly, Gerlach, who wasn't the target of the country of knights, wouldn't have been exposed. The auditorium would have ended peacefully with applause. Gerlach didn't need to run anymore, and Luoya didn't need to chase after him because he had been exposed. Due to Brittany's actions, some people in the country of knights seemed to have changed their attitude toward Luoya. Brittany's loss of control was similar to a broken window effect. As she wasn't stopped in time, She became an example. The young girls named Selena and Juliana began to break free from William's restraints and reveal their true natures. Nua Iyer and Xia Luot were also alarmed by Luoya's involvement. The members of both sides swarmed into the auditorium, which led to the current confrontation. If Brittany had attacked Luoya, the young man could have laughed it off after defending himself. However, the one who was attacked was Gerlach. Naturally, Luoya couldn't forgive Brittany on behalf of others, nor could he hand Brittany over to take the blame. Your Highness Williams, Miss Teresa, long time no see. Please allow me to express my gratitude for your help in the north. Long time no see, Luoya. What an acquaintance. Your Highness Williams, some of your members were too excited about transferring to another school, which led to some misunderstandings between our friends. I don't think this was the country of Knight's intention. What do you think? Williams apologized politely, which made Luoya sigh in relief. However, before the young man could rejoice, the armored figure suddenly looked at Nua Iyer and Xia Luot with hostility in his tone. What? As everyone knows, the country of Knights believes in strength. Although we are now in a foreign country, we have no intention of listening to the instructions of the weak. Only the strong can gain our respect. We haven't fought yet, so I don't know about these things. With William's sudden provocation and his public declaration that he would not listen to the ring-bearer's declaration, the audience was in an uproar. Nua Iyer took a step forward and asked with an angry smile. Xia Luot reached into his arms and grabbed the bottle containing the golden soul. So we can go now, right? I've been waiting for a long time. As a warrior who pursued battle and slaughter all year round, Selena was always interested in the strongest of her enemies, just like Miss Angel, who was overflowing with curses. However, before she could launch her attack, a sudden heavy pressure mixed with a bone-chilling coldness suddenly appeared from the side. When the young lady turned her head and focused on Luoya, the black-haired young man looked at her for the first time. When his golden eyes landed on the brown-haired young lady, several shadows suddenly appeared in the young lady's eyes. What followed was an intense fear that aroused Selena's instincts. Chapter 375. When night fell, Luoya, Paul, and Jarek sat around the table in the Broken Sword Tavern in the commercial street of the college, sipping wine and reading the newspaper on the table. The newspaper staff who didn't know the details attributed it to the cultural difference caused by the custom of respecting only the strong in the country of Knights. They highly praised Luoya's performance in suppressing the other party and defending the authority of the ring-bearers. However, the focus of the report was still on the matter of Antonio encouraging the first-year students to boldly participate in the Challenger Cup competition. After discovering that there were suddenly so many people from the country of Knights, Luoya immediately understood that the plot in the original work had greatly changed in reality. At least, it was certain that it was no longer the main event. Judging from the current situation, this hostility was especially obvious on Nua Iyer and the others. In the past, when Luoya and Xia Luot first met, Miss Luoya was also angry because Luoya was with other women. However, that was because the two were engaged. Luoya could understand this point. Jarek, the #1 doghead military advisor of Rose Tsongwei's faction, was the young master of the Pander Stevenson Marquis family in the country of Knights. As one of the high nobles, he naturally knew a lot about the situation in the country of Knights. However, due to excessive shock, when he left the auditorium, his legs were like noodles. If it weren't for Paul, he probably wouldn't have been able to walk out. One of the reasons for this was that, as the saying goes, alcohol strengthens one's courage. No matter how terrifying the situation was, 2 glasses of alcohol would basically make one feel heroic. Another reason was that the lively atmosphere and crowd in the tavern during the dinner peak would give one a sense of security. Remember in a second. What? That woman is your fiancé? In the Broken Sword Tavern, Paul, who didn't know the cause and effect of the matter, couldn't help but exclaim after hearing Jellic's story. The content of his words immediately attracted the attention of several guests nearby. Seeing this, Luoya hurriedly reminded them. The 3 picked up their glasses and drank. After a long silence, Jellic continued to talk about the situation of the people from the country of Knights. In terms of appearance, Even though Brittany wasn't as beautiful as Nua Iyer and the others, she was still considered a standard beauty. Besides, due to her years of training, she had a great figure and powerful strength. She also had the bloodline of the ancient Valkyrie. But just like Xia's old rule, there were pros and cons. The bloodline of the Valkyrie didn't only have advantages, but it also had huge flaws. Brani's family had been dominated by females for generations. Their bloodline abilities were far stronger than that of males, but the family head was always a male. The biggest reason for this was that females with the Valkyrie bloodline were emotionally unstable. Brani's condition was considered mild in the family, but even so, Gerlach still couldn't take it. As a girl's gift, it does seem a little bloody, but the country of knights has such a custom, so it shouldn't be a big deal, right? No, that's not the main point. The main point is, when she returned, she was covered in blood and told me that if I had a change of heart, I would end up like these magical creatures. After hearing the gray-haired young man's words, Paul's hand froze in midair. His eyes revealed fear. Luoya took a sip of wine and sighed helplessly. That's right. Back then, the young Brani asked her mother for advice on how to make Jellic like her. If she were in an ordinary family, this wouldn't be a problem. After all, the older, the wiser. But the problem was that this happened in the Lund family. Brani's mother was also a Valkyrie and was much sicker than Brani. With their current relationship, it was obvious that they couldn't resolve this misunderstanding on their own. If no one interfered, perhaps Brani's engagement would be broken off, and she would turn completely evil. When that happened, Jellic's life would be in danger. Luoya, who wanted information about the others, started asking questions. Jellic listened and told them one by one. However, compared to the Lund family, who knew everything about Brani, Jellic's information was lacking. There's actually such a thing? How mysterious. But it was better not to know about the secrets of the royal family. Chapter 376. Are Williams and Teresa a couple? Putting aside the fact that there were so many outsiders this time, the last time Luoya met them in Aberville in the north, it was a real accident. At that time, Williams and Teresa still didn't take off their armor, and the two didn't have any intimate actions. Even when they left, it was Williams who put his hand on Teresa's shoulder. Such a thought flashed through the young man's mind, but he didn't say it out loud. He picked up the wooden cup and took a sip of the sweet and malty beer. After ordering a portion of nuts and a portion of jerky to go with the beer, the three of them continued their discussion. Luoya thought for a while and remembered the girl with black hair and red eyes in the country of knights. Gerlach showed a distressed expression when he heard the words. He thought for a while and said, "As for Juliana herself, she usually doesn't appear at banquets. She only appears at night. I heard that it's because she's afraid of sunburn. I don't know her extraordinary strength, but generally speaking, she's easy to get along with." Listening to Gerlach's introduction, Luoya's face showed an expected expression. He, who was familiar with history, actually had some ideas when they met. After hearing Gerlach's introduction, he was even more certain. Legend has it that the blood race was born from the blood of Xia. There were also rumors that the blood race was born from the blood of Xia. But no matter which version, it was inseparable from Xia. In this world, having a relationship with Xia basically represented a noble birth. In fact, some human scholars believed that humans were blood race who had lost their abilities after degeneration. Thinking of this, Luoya shook his head and began to recall the brown-haired girl who left the deepest impression on him. He remembered that her name was Selena. That girl was undoubtedly very conspicuous, but it wasn't because of anything good. It was because of the beast-like killing intent. Selena is the daughter of Count Batet. In fact, our relationship is not bad. We have met when we were young, but Selena wasn't like this at that time. Luoya raised his eyebrows and asked. Gerlach thought for a while and said, "The Batet family has always been famous for their berserkers. The outside world speculates that the price of their bloodline may be the desire to kill. It's fine during wartime, but it will become troublesome during peacetime. Selena seems to be very talented in that family, so the result is that her ability is even more difficult to control." After listening to Gerlach's words, The black-haired young man fell into silence for a while. He didn't expect that the troublesome girl would have such a story. Paul on the side also showed a surprised expression. But when the two were about to let Garak continue to dig deeper into the country of knights, the young man helplessly said that there was not much information left. Garak scratched his head and said so. Luoya also expressed his understanding. After all, in this era where information wasn't developed, the nobles in the easternmost and westernmost parts of the same country might not know each other. It was already good enough that Garak knew so much. Luoya didn't forget his original goal. Although it was important to communicate with Williams and the others, Ancestor Estrella was his top priority. What was the relationship between the two that led to the goddess of fate's advice being related to the country of knights? Dean Antonio. This was the person that Luoya had decided to greet. In fact, when they first returned to the academy, Luoya wanted to visit Dean Antonio with Luoya to contribute to Ancestor Estrella's matter. But after careful consideration, in order to hide their blood relationship, Luoya didn't bring Lillian along. Strolling through the campus at night, the black-haired young man entered the office building where the higher-ups of the academy were located. After showing the ring on his finger to the staff, the special treatment of the ring-bearer in St. Freya Academy played its role. Luoya's request for a meeting was immediately sent upstairs, and he received a quick reply. After the meeting was approved, the staff's attitude became more attentive. Luoya responded with a smile. Both of them went all the way to the door of the dean's office. After knocking on the door and receiving permission, Luoya entered this place that could be called the core of St. Freya Academy for the first time. In the classically decorated office, the white-haired old man sitting behind the long table said so with a smile when he saw Luoya. He had already expected his arrival. Under such circumstances, it was reasonable and also the most efficient way to seek help from Dean Antonio. Helping Luoya and getting closer to Luoya was also something that Antonio had to do for a long time. Was it Williams's problem or the country of knights? Dean Antonio, I want to ask you something. The gloves that Ancestor Estrella gave you, do you still have them? ? As soon as Luoya's voice trailed off, Antonio was stunned. Chapter 377. Antonio's current mood was very complicated. Antonio was too careless. He didn't dodge and was hit on the spot, leaving him dumbfounded. After his mood eased a little, Antonio couldn't help but feel enlightened. He could only advise him to take care of himself and reflect on it. Don't play these tricks. When it comes to exposing the dark history, harmony is the most important thing. After the initial shock, Antonio immediately thought about how Luoya knew about these things that even he had almost forgotten, as well as his teacher, Estrid. After a detailed consideration, the old man came to only one conclusion, and that was the legendary bloodline ability of that clan. 400 years ago, a member of the Dusk Sage Association, codenamed Guardian, told me. After listening to Luoya's answer, Antonio's face revealed a wry smile, but at the same time, his mood was lifted because after Luoya experienced that period of time 400 years ago, the biggest communication barrier between Antonio and him disappeared. Assisting in awakening a powerhouse of unknown origin, no matter who it was, this kind of thing would be very cautious. After all, if the awakened powerhouse was an extremely vicious person, then it was likely that it would cause a great loss of life. But if one had a certain understanding of the other party and could confirm that both parties were related by blood, this kind of thing was much simpler. I'm here to ask you, Guardian Antonio, my ancestor, Estrid, what's the situation now? Is the problem she's facing related to the remaining forces of the Kingdom of Night Sage Society? After listening to Luoya's question, the white-haired old man sighed and said so. He couldn't help but reveal a little sadness on his face. After thinking for a moment, Antonio slowly told the truth of the matter. What? In Leinster 400 years ago, without Luoya presiding over it, the morale of the Saint Heroes Society was very low. In fact, it didn't last long at all. After the Saint Heroes Society's forces were eliminated, the Brotherhood of Redemption launched a siege on the inner city. At that time, the battle was very tragic, and the defenders suffered heavy casualties. The battle that followed was a nightmare that haunted the old man for hundreds of years. The shattered city, the fallen comrades, and countless ordinary people were scattered in the aftermath of the impact of Pulis' curse power. At the end of the battle, it was the scene of Estrad fusing with Chaos Dream. But it's a pity that even the attack of such a shameless person was unbearable for the fragile Chaos Dream. At that time, Madame Estrad, who was severely injured, took the initiative to fuse with the Chaos Dream, in order to protect this treasure that concerns the future of mankind. She used her Dream Demon attribute to restore it automatically at daybreak, but because of that, she fell into an eternal slumber. After this battle, Leinster was almost reduced to a dead city. St. Freya Academy automatically restored itself after daybreak due to Estrad's dream enchantment, but there were less than 100 survivors in the academy. And of course, the tragedy of Leinster had a profound impact on the history of mankind. For that reason, the Human Alliance had even stopped their counterattack against the Otherworldlings, setting up a special investigation team to hunt down the cultists in their ranks and carrying out a great purge. Due to the terrible impact of the Leinster tragedy, the name of the Lord of Curses, priest, had been erased from history. Hundreds of years had passed, and there were very few who knew the truth of that incident. After hearing the whole story of the tragedy of Leinster, Wuxia asked Estrad about the reason why she couldn't wake up. The answer he got was that Estrad's behavior wasn't within the plan, which left the artificial elf, Margaret, at a loss on how to deal with it. At that time, the other reason was the opposition from the Twilight Sage Association. However, in the face of so many difficulties, Antonio didn't give up. In order to save his mentor, he devoted himself to studying Chaos Dream for hundreds of years. As his research deepened, he finally came up with a feasible solution. The blood of ordinary Akit tribesmen is useless. They are very different from the Arde family from 1,000 years ago. Only the awakened bloodline that is closer to the origin will work. That's right, that's you. Another dream demon bloodline in the country of knights. Upon hearing Antonio's words, Wuxia narrowed his eyes and his pupils contracted abruptly. Chapter 378. Wuxia looked at Antonio with a serious expression, and the latter nodded affirmatively. The dream demon bloodline is in that country, but I can't get any help from them. What I want you to do is to get their support and push forward the plan. There's nothing wrong with what you've said, but since that's the case, why did you allow our conflict to continue, Dean? Isn't this the opposite of your goal? You mean there's something you're hiding? Naturally, Roha heard the word school before, but as a traditional jutsu master, his knowledge of martial arts is limited. It's almost a blank. That's the school of the royal family of knights, the Cobnet family. It's one of the 3 core powers of the Cobnet family, together with the source substance, courage, and the dragon bloodline. Strictly speaking, it's a special curse. The source substance was an unavoidable part of Shiya's supernatural power, and it was also the core of the supernatural system. But just like traditional conjurers who created all kinds of curses to strengthen their power, the knights who leaned towards the physical body also found many ways to strengthen their power. One of them was the school of thought, and its essence was actually a kind of pseudo-source substance. Lofty ideals, firm principles, unshakable determination. And the stronger the will, the more invincible and powerful the heart sword would be. It could even reach the level of a holy sword when developed to the limit. I understand the situation of the Heart Sword School, but what does it have to do with the conflict between us? The reason why I let the conflict happen is simple. It's because the conflict will inevitably happen, and the sooner it happens, the less impact it will have on both sides. Because the path you're taking is too different from the traditional classicism of the Ald family and the Twilight Sage Association. Hearing this unexpected word, Wuxia couldn't help but frown slightly, and Antonio immediately gave an answer. Traditional classicism advocates sacrificing one's own fame and fortune to protect the human world, while hiding in the darkness. The current country of knights pursues this. Their closed environment, and the fact that Williams is wearing a suit of armor, might have something to do with this. But what about you? In order to build a strong will, the Heartsword School will often be too strict on their successors. Williams was able to endure the armor and tough training for a long time because of his classical chivalry. This is probably one of the components of his heart sword school. However, your path is completely different from his. This conflict of ideas is inevitable. After understanding William's situation, Luoya nodded slightly. He finally understood Antonio's actions. It had to be said that after knowing the full picture, Luoya also felt that the conflict between the two parties was inevitable. After all, it was impossible for him to give up his current life. On the other hand, Luoya also praised and disapproved of the classical chivalry attitude in his heart. The reason was the change in environment. Back then, the Auld family was the shadow of the royalty and the uncrowned king of the human world. They didn't need to stand in front of the stage and shout. The ancient Austin Empire was the only administrative body that was highly related to the fate of the entire human world. They could allocate enough resources for the Auld family, centralize their advantages, and resolve the crisis without affecting the normal activities of most humans. But now, the people's hearts were scattered, and it was hard to lead them. In the current environment, even if one were to stand on the side of the road and shout, "Save the world," with a loudspeaker, no one would be willing to spend a cent or contribute a little, let alone in the dark. In the end, if one didn't centralize power and resources, there would often be big problems in the face of a great crisis. This was a law that had been proven in Luoya's previous life. From a human's perspective, Luoya felt that this kind of mechanism without positive feedback wasn't right. Noble idealists were indeed admirable, but should idealists starve? If this is the difference in ideas, then we might not be able to get along well. Dean, do you have any good ideas? Past experience? I'm afraid you are more special to her. The old man thought as he gazed at Luoya with a meaningful smile. Chapter 379. On the street at night, Luoya strolled around the campus with a cane in his hand. He recalled the inexplicable look from Dean Antonio before he left and felt something was wrong. It was unrealistic to tell others his thoughts without reservation, unless the two parties had enough trust, which Luoya and Antonio obviously didn't have. Listening to the noise of the students walking around at night, Luoya strolled away from Antonio's office building after a detailed discussion, and walked in the direction of the mantra station. However, before he walked far, he suddenly heard the sound of the system bell. The advice of the goddess of fate. Huh? Drink juice? Although the conversation with Antonio was easy, the two sides were not close to the point of drinking tea and chatting. After wasting a lot of time talking, Luoya didn't drink a drop of water, which made his throat a little uncomfortable, and the dried nuts he ate before coming here made him feel a little angry. Full of doubts, Luoya thought for a moment and changed his route. He followed the nearby crowd into the commercial street, and found that it was the most lively time of the commercial street. It's actually so lively? Looking at the absolute majority of the gathered crowd, Luoya couldn't help but sigh at the merchant's grasp of the appearance of the food. Just when he was wondering why the advice asked him to come here, a familiar figure appeared in the crowd in front of Luoya's eyes. At night, with so many people buying, it was difficult for the girl who couldn't speak and could only write to communicate. She may also attract the attention of others, especially after the conflict with Luoya and others in the afternoon. As a transfer student, she was too conspicuous. It's so beautiful. Do you want to try that? I see, then I'll buy it for you. Hearing the sudden question, the girl who nodded subconsciously was slightly taken aback. It was not until this moment that she finally recovered her senses. Teresa turned her head and looked at the side in surprise. When she saw the black-haired boy beside her, she couldn't help but widen her eyes. Good evening, Mr. Luoya. After listening to Luoya's words, the blushing girl wrote these two sentences in a panic, then held the book in front of her chest. However, after seeing the girl's reply, Luoya was silent. He looked at the sign next to the popular stall, thought for a moment and said, Seeing Teresa like this, Luoya couldn't help but smile. After a short wait, the black-haired boy finally succeeded in bringing back two colorful drinks for the girl. The two people tasted side by side at the long public table on the side of the road. Miss Teresa's throat is easily dry? Chapter 380. He's been waiting for you. Williams is waiting for me? What does that mean? If she wanted to explain this sentence, it would be difficult to avoid touching on some of William's secrets. Although Roja should be very reliable from his standpoint, this kind of thing wasn't something Teresa could decide to say. Thinking of this, the girl sighed and slowly shook her head toward Roja. The black-haired boy saw this and tacitly didn't ask again. He nodded and picked up the cup and drank the juice. Such a thought flashed through Luoya's mind and made his heart feel heavy. But after looking at the young lady beside him, he sighed in relief. Teresa was one of the core members of the group from the country of knights. She was also the most normal person Luoya felt. It was important for Luoya to establish a good relationship with her. Thinking of this, the young man understood the importance of this suggestion. But then, a question appeared in his mind. 1 second to remember. Teresa, are you visiting the academy? If so, I can introduce you. No, actually, I'm looking for someone. Yes, it's Brittany. I couldn't find her after dinner. Seeing the name on the young lady's notebook, the black-haired young man suddenly thought of something and was dumbfounded. In the forest outside the Blue Hall, a golden-haired girl wearing light armor was peeking at the elegant mansion through the gaps of the leaves. She looked at the lights on the first floor of the building that went out one by one, and the sound of her breathing couldn't help but become heavier. But such a genius, after entering St. Freya Academy, unexpectedly met her fiancé who ran away from home to escape the marriage contract. She didn't dare to take him away, because she met someone she couldn't fight against. That was the target of this transfer operation Luoya caught. If she fought, she definitely couldn't defeat him. If she wanted, she probably couldn't take him away either. But there might be other ways. Although there was a man named Paul by Gaylock's side, he was only a grade 5 source grade and wasn't much of a hindrance. According to the information they gathered during this half a day, most of the students in Sangji Hall were first years, and there weren't many who were strong. Then, if I rush in now wouldn't, I advise you not to do that. All of a sudden, Brittany's body stiffened as she was about to launch a surprise attack. She turned around and saw a pair of golden eyes looking at her calmly from the depths of the forest under the shadow of the lush foliage. The emotionless gaze seemed to be silently persuading her to calm down. Brittany's pupils contracted when she discovered the young man behind her. The fear in her heart made her want to release her curse, but she was afraid of provoking the unfathomable man. While she was in a dilemma, Luoya spoke again. Teresa. In any case, the friendly relationship between Luoya and Teresa eased Brittany's nerves slightly. Luoya also heaved a sigh of relief upon seeing this. Mr. Luoya, I am his fiancé. If you stop me I will. Huh? Help? What do you mean? I've heard about the incident with the Run family, and what you've done. I'll just tell you the result. If this continues, the engagement will be annulled. As soon as Luoya said this, Brittany, who already had a premonition, felt as though she was struck by lightning. She held onto the tree trunk beside her as her eyes glowed like a dead fish. However, just as she was in despair, Luoya suddenly changed the topic. Hope. Help each other. What do you mean? I'll say this first. I won't be a traitor. Miss Brittany, you're overthinking it. I only hope that you can help me establish a friendly relationship with Williams. This will only be beneficial for both of us. Or do you prefer to treat me as an enemy? Brittany hesitated upon hearing Luoya's question. Establishing a good relationship with Luoya was the goal of the country of knights, so there didn't seem to be any problems. However, she had to admit that forming such an alliance in private made her feel like she was betraying her teammate. Miss Brittany, I can actually provide you with something else. A set of cutlery and blanket from Gerlach. Luoya revealed a satisfied smile as he looked at the young lady who widened her eyes in excitement. Spy +1. Chapter 381. This attribute can be mild or severe, but the Valkyrie's blood has one advantage, which is that it's normal for an outsider, and this is the premise for Roja and Bronny to communicate. The third blessing was probably to get closer to Teresa and stop Brittany from running amok. But this was just a facade. The real purpose was to rope in the knight's country and create the conditions to awaken Estrella. Luoya sighed and returned to his room. As soon as he entered the room, a silver-haired figure hugged him. "Ai Lizzie, why are you here again? Isn't the bed fixed?" "Big brother, Teacher Chris's kitchen utensils are broken, so he asked me to come here for dinner." "Kitchen utensils after the bedding? Forget about the bed. How could the pot be broken?" Luoya was full of questions, but couldn't find a way to retort. He pinched his brows and looked at the adorable young lady. "It was supposed to be like this, but my ability detected suspicious activity nearby. For safety reasons, I waited here for Big Brother. But judging from the situation just now, she seems to be your guest? Is it because of the moonlight? I feel like Ai Lizzie's ability is amazing." "Heh. You sent her away with just a set of tableware and a blanket? What a pitiful woman. I've already cough. I mean, her interests aren't good." With the help of his strategic ally, Teacher Chris, tonight was the second night that Ai Lizzie successfully stayed behind. But if things went according to plan, Luoya would have to sleep in the empty room on the second floor. This wasn't something Ai Lizzie could tolerate. How could she make use of this rare opportunity to block Big Brother's escape route? "By the way, Big Brother, how about we play chess tonight? How about watching the moon after chess? How about taking a bath after watching the moon?" Luoya, who was helpless in the face of Ai Lizzie's continuous coquettishness, turned to look at the silver-haired girl with a stern look. "What's wrong with that? Didn't I bathe with Big Brother before? Could it be that Big Brother doesn't like Ai Lizzie anymore? When they grow up, they will find their younger sister annoying or something." "When did I say that you're annoying? Ai Lizzie, don't overthink things. That's because you've grown up." The black-haired youth ridiculed in his heart. He looked at the beautiful girl under the moonlight, whose beauty was even more soul-stirring. His eyes swept across her body that had already begun to develop. He only felt a restless flame rampaging through his body, burning his heart and making him panic. As she grew older, Ai Lizzie's charm grew stronger and stronger, and the power of the perfect origin substance began to manifest itself. Luoya was already at the limit of what she could do normally, and the consequences of bathing together were unimaginable. "Then, I want to sleep with you tonight." Hearing Ai Lizzie's request, Luoya couldn't help but hesitate. Seeing him like this, Ai Lizzie's red eyes began to fill with tears again. She bit her lips as if she was about to cry, forcing the black-haired youth to nod. "I understand, Big Brother. Am I spoiling her too much? But how should a normal brother and sister get along?" A few years ago in the Akot family, the young Luoya often played board games with Ai Lizzie in their pajamas. Because the two of them had a lot of private lessons during the day, they could only be together at night, and it wasn't taboo to fall asleep when they were tired from playing. However, as the saying goes, after Luoya became the acting feudal lord, he became busier and busier, and it had been a long time since he played with Ai Lizzie like this. The moonlight tonight was very good, and Ai Lizzie, who was bathed in the moonlight, was full of energy. The two of them played until it was close to midnight, and the result was naturally Ai Lizzie defeating Luoya, who automatically went easy on himself. The two of them played until they were tired, and after looking at the moon for a while by the window, the silver-haired girl yawned. Luoya saw this and smiled, officially asking to rest. "Big Brother, this is?" In the darkness after the lights were turned off, Luoya and Ai Lizzie silently prepared to sleep, but not long after, the girl's weak voice suddenly came from the other side of the 38th parallel. "Then how did you sleep at Teacher Chris's place?" Now you can fall asleep, right?" Feeling the warmth by her hand, the silver-haired girl was silent for a moment before answering softly, and she couldn't help but smile sweetly. Just like this, the two of them held hands and fell into a sweet dream. The next morning, when Luoya woke up, the silver-haired girl was already lying on his chest. Looking at the border that was completely torn apart by Ai Lizzie, the boy sighed slightly, but he didn't pursue the matter. The main reason for this decision was naturally that Luoya didn't want to become enemies with the people from the country of knights, And another reason was that the responsibility of the enforcers was to maintain the stability of the academy. Although Williams and the others said that, at least until now, their actions didn't cause any harm to the order of the academy. Explosive spell learning and practice class. This was one of the classes in Luoya's class schedule, and it was famous for its long name. It was a prerequisite class for the spell practice class, and its purpose was to train the extraordinaire spell-casting speed. It was a class that leaned more towards actual combat. Another grading standard for this class was the destructive power of the instantaneous explosive spell casting. After all, speed alone wasn't enough to solve the problem. Sufficient destructive power was needed to defeat the enemy on the battlefield, otherwise, there was a high probability of being killed by the enemy who was driven to desperation. Luoya's explosive spellcasting was an advantage that even Lillian, who didn't have a good relationship with him, praised endlessly. Not to mention the students, even the teacher of this class couldn't compare with him. If it wasn't for the fact that this class was compulsory, Luoya would have skipped it directly. After all, it was really a waste of time for him. As a student who skipped 1/3 of the class, even if there was a reason for it, Luoya still felt a little guilty, so he decided to have a proper attitude during the exam. But what he didn't expect was that when the class started, an unexpected figure appeared under the guidance of the teacher. It was the transfer student, Williams. Transfer student. In the last row of the classroom, a black-haired boy and a figure in armor looked at each other from afar. Their gazes weren't sharp, but they only had eyes for each other. Luoya thought so in his heart, but these thoughts weren't important to the old teacher George. After a brief introduction of Williams, the white-bearded old man announced the official start of the exam class. But what surprised Luoya and all the students was that the target of their spells wasn't the target of the training ground, but a goose. Looking at the goose that was grabbed by the neck by the old man, George, and brought to an open area, the students were puzzled for a moment. However, George didn't care about the students' reaction. He cast spells to block the pecking of the big white goose and calmly said to the students, "Let's go." After saying that, the old man walked to a table and sat down. The confident students began to line up one by one to show off their skills. For a moment, flames and thunder appeared one after another, and the sound of explosions was deafening. Within a second, the spells that the students released violently bombarded the splitting geese, causing explosions. After each explosion, the number of geese on the ground would change accordingly. After a big fireball, 5 small geese appeared on the scorched ground, and then they gathered together in a flash of light. Seeing this magical scene, the students were shocked, but they didn't have any more worries. Thus, one by one, the Cursemancers who used geese as their combat power unit were born. Jack 2 geese. The armored knight walked to the side of the weapon rack, and casually picked up an ordinary long sword. In the next moment, the atmosphere around Williams changed. Yes, the Cursemancer aside, the knight's sword was a close-range attack. If it was a long-range attack, the curse power could be released, but naturally, it wasn't as strong as directly attached to the sword. In fact, many students in the classroom also rushed up to attack, but looking at the target in the distance, Williams didn't have any intention of approaching. Not going over? Do you still need to use a sword at such a long distance? The violent fluctuation of the curse power caused a buzzing sound. When the long sword slashed down, there was no light flying out. Instead, it left an extremely condensed long line of light in the eyes of everyone. In the next moment, the target in the distance was instantly blasted into thousands of pieces by countless magic elements, floating in the air like powder. Williams, out of the range of measurement, full marks. So this is the Heart Sword sect? Mr. Luoya, what do you think of my strength? Facing Williams' question, Luoya thought for a moment and replied with a smile. However, what he didn't expect was that his plain words made the armored figure very happy, and then he directly gave a suggestion. Hearing Williams's invitation again, the black-haired young man couldn't help but be slightly stunned and thought silently. Chapter 382. On the lawn, the armored girl looked at the young man who was smiling at her. Her heart was beating fast and she couldn't help but extend her sincere invitation. That's right. In the eyes of the girl, one of the reasons why Luoya didn't immediately join forces with her was because she hadn't displayed enough strength yet. For this reason, she found an opportunity to display a part of her strength today, and this indeed earned Luoya's praise. I'm sorry, Your Highness Williams. Thank you for your invitation, but I don't have such plans for now. Hearing Luoya's reply, the girl fell into silence for a moment. However, what she didn't expect was Luoya's next words. Your Highness Williams, last night I went to look for the Dean, who is also the former guardian of the Twilight Sage Association, Antonio. I had a conversation with him and learned about the situation and ideals of the country of knights. I give you my highest respect for your perseverance. Hearing Luoya's words, the girl in the armor couldn't help but reveal a surprised expression. The identity of Guardian Antonio was a highly confidential information, even in the country of knights. Williams found it unbelievable that Luoya knew about him. However, the young man's next words made her widen her eyes. Untimely? What do you mean? That kind of thing isn't necessary. In the past countless years, the Twilight Sage Association has been maintaining order in the dark and left behind glorious results. I don't think there's anything wrong with this model. Moreover, most of the crises don't require so many useless people. Just a few elites can solve it. That's right, it's you and me. I'm talking about your tribe and the Dawn Association. Indeed, for most of the crises, the role of high-tier transcendence is far beyond that of low-tier transcendence. The difference in strength between them can't be made up with numbers. However, in some special situations, the situation is the opposite. For example, the situation at the borders hasn't been optimistic in recent years. For that kind of thing, we can just join hands when the time comes. After the Twilight Sage Guild has disappeared for hundreds of years, I believe that the most important thing is to follow the tradition and re-establish the spirit of chivalry that is centered on protection, and not moved by fame and fortune. As long as we have such determination, although following the tradition of 1,000 years ago is admirable, if we don't keep up with the times, how is it different from the unchangeable ancestral teachings? Only talk about the spirit and not the material? I don't think that's the right thing to do. Selfless dedication is admirable, but the right thing to do is to be rewarded. I don't think that willpower alone can sustain such determination for a long time. For thousands of years, the Cognate family has always kept the tradition in mind and cultivated the next generation with the spirit of chivalry. I have also paid a lot for this. Mr. Luoya, are you questioning me and my family? Upon hearing William's words, Luoya couldn't help but be slightly taken aback. He stared at the heavy armor in front of him, and suddenly recalled the difficulties Teresa had mentioned to him. Thinking of this, the youth's expression changed as he hastily replied. There seems to be a quarrel over there? The crowd began to whisper among themselves, but neither of them cared. At this time, Luoya was thinking of a way to change Williams's mind, while the girl recalled the girls who had always been by Williams's side. She had some ideas in her mind. Chapter 383. Young warriors, today is the day to pursue your dreams. After half a year of continuous promotion, the long-awaited Challengers Cup finally opened today. Whether it was the contestants or the spectators who came from afar, it had reached an all-time high. The attention of the higher-ups of various countries was also attracted. The special approval of the first years added fuel to the fire of this lively event. The Challengers Cup preliminaries were held in more than 10 locations selected from the numerous secret realms of the Scholar Country. As for which group was assigned to which location, it was randomly assigned. Just like how everyone's talent and curses would be different, different locations would have a huge impact on a cursemancer, especially the difference between land and water. In the past, among the contestants who drew the Maze Cliff, there had been situations where some cursemancers who were good at water battles defeated the seeded contestants. The difference in location was the biggest impact, followed by the influence of equipment in the unrestricted spell ranking battles. After that, there were people like Luoya who had special bloodlines or special spells. They might be able to display more shocking strength in certain aspects than their opponents who were at level 3 of the source rank. In Luoya's case, he didn't even make it into the top 10. From this, it could be seen that the rankings were quite exaggerated. However, this was also related to the fact that Luoya didn't go all out during his time in the academy. Under the nervous gaze of the crowd, the spell power of the image finally dissipated and finally stopped at a dark area. Oh no, I've never been to the swamp. Such situations were repeated as the locations were announced. Soon it was Luoya's turn to be in the 6th group. Why is it that damn place? Hearing the 6th group's location, Luoya's side burst into an uproar. The students who had already formed cliques had ugly expressions after hearing the news. Some of the more timid ones even began to shrink back. The black-haired boy could understand this. After all, the Temple of Silence wasn't very popular. There were skeletons among Shia's monsters, so naturally, there were also things like ghosts. Generally speaking, the probability of these things appearing naturally in peacetime was very low. Luoya had never seen them before because the country he lived in dealt with them well. That's it. Amidst the noisy crowd, Luoya quietly listened to the elimination matches of all the groups. Apart from him, the others seemed to be normal. After the selection of the venues was completed, the tens of thousands of contestants left the venue under the guidance of the staff. They began to move toward the entrance of the secret territory. The curtains of the preliminary round finally opened amidst the cheers of the audience. In the country of scholars, many students had the misconception that the nearby secret realm belonged to the country of scholars. However, this idea was wrong. The Temple of Silence was rumored to be the old site of an ancient civilization, but no one knew exactly what civilization it was. After countless years of erosion, almost no clues could be found, which was why it was casually used as a competition venue. Chapter 384. At the edge of the forest and the ruins, the black-haired young man who was wrapped in yellow curses stared at the brown-haired girl in front of him, dumbfounded. On the other side, Selena held a long sword in her hand, not knowing what to do. The lawless origin substance gave Selena a spear that could break through all curses, but no matter how good the weapon was, it was useless if one didn't know how to use it. That was why the Batet family's battle power was actually driven by two cores. One was the origin substance, and the other was the bloodline of a sacred beast from ancient times. But what if one of them was removed? In the past, only Selena's father could suppress the restless bloodline in the girl's body with absolute strength, allowing Selena to enjoy a period of peace. That was why when her bloodline was suppressed and her brain suddenly became clear, Selena blurted out the word father. But soon, the girl realized that something was wrong. There was no need for the help of medicine, and there was no pain. Her bloodline calmed down in an instant. And it was at the moment when Selena's battle intent was at its strongest, and she was about to swing her sword. In this situation, the biggest possibility was that the other party's bloodline was the same as hers, and far superior to hers. No, that's impossible. What did you do? How did it feel to be called father, all of a sudden? It was quite sudden. It was probably because of the advice of the goddess of fate. I felt a familiar aura, so I came out to take a look. I didn't expect to find something unexpected. Is this a bloodline of the same kind? Yes, this little girl has the bloodline of a sacred beast. The black-haired young man was stunned when he heard Paytila's words. He didn't expect that even a sacred beast could mix with the bloodline of a human. But after thinking about it carefully, he wasn't that surprised. After all, in terms of size and racial differences, William's dragon bloodline was similar. Sensing Luoya's thoughts, Paytila gave such an explanation, and Luoya finally understood why Selena was panicking. Looking at Selena, whose hair stood on end when she felt Paytila's gaze, Luoya finally understood the current situation. He looked at the girl whose murderous aura had dissipated and finally understood the intention of this advice. Luoya, who was thinking this, looked at the brown-haired girl who was holding a weapon and shaking her tail with a conflicted expression. After thinking for a moment, he spoke with a serious expression. What do you mean? If I'm not mistaken, His Highness Williams won't allow you to attack me in the preliminary round. As a transfer student of the Country of Knights and a member of the Dawn Association, Miss Serena, you don't seem to be listening to His Highness William's orders. Chapter 385. For the preliminary round, all the contestants and the audience might not be very passionate, but they would never have any worries because it was basically absolutely safe. The excessive damage of the substitute curse vessel did not refer to the severity of the eliminated person's injury, but it referred to the curse power content and strength when the curse vessel was destroyed. For example, Selena's waist slash was more serious than the curse attack of other cursemancers. However, the curse power content and strength were obviously higher than the fireball created by the curse vessel. Although Luoya was very concerned about other people's situation after the preliminary round, he was not worried about the safety of his relatives and friends. Therefore, he was particularly shocked when he heard that Paul was injured in the preliminary round. In the preliminary round of the Challenger Cup, there were not many scenes that the audience could see. After all, there were more than 10 venues where tens of thousands of people were fighting at the same time. It was basically a situation where the smoke of war was everywhere. The venue in the Secret Realm was too large, so only the most intense battles could be shown to the audience who were excited because of the opening ceremony. In this year's preliminary round, the most broadcast was the 10th group. Therefore, for Paul's advancement, Luoya actually did not have much confidence. The faction did not put any pressure on him. Paul himself also participated in the Challenger Cup with a participation mentality. However, what was unexpected was that the 10th group, which was originally inconspicuous, had someone eyeing him in advance. It was Gelt, one of the two males from the Country of Knights. For the students, when they saw the transfer students from the Country of Knights, they would definitely notice him first, but they would not take a second look at him after that. After all, compared with others, he was really a bit ordinary. However, it was this unattractive guy who became the shocking dark horse in the preliminary round, and also became Paul's obstacle. Paul's source substance was the kingdom of the Achiman tribe. It could be used as the royal source substance by the Achiman tribe, which showed its high quality. However, as the saying goes, cultivation depends on the individual. Even if they had the same source substance, the extraordinary power would develop in different directions according to each person's situation and understanding. It was just like everyone used the same set of textbooks in university, but the papers they wrote were different. As for Paul, he was still a farmer last year. Whether it was his understanding of origin substances or his thoughts, he naturally couldn't reach Lillian's level. But as the main character of the original work, he had his own abilities. With this ability, Paul successfully rushed out of the forest and approached the cave where the advancement crystal was stored. However, he didn't expect to be ambushed by Gelt there. What was even more surprising was Gelt's ability, which was similar to a gigantification curse. Part of the gigantification was indeed awe-inspiring, and the target he wanted to attack was indeed only Paul. However, under the Rolling Stones, the aftermath of the impact affected many of the top players who had rushed out of the forest. Paul saw this opportunity and had a bright idea. He loudly spread the rumor that Gelt wanted to monopolize the 10 crystals. For a moment, the crowd was agitated, and everyone joined forces to attack Gelt. After listening to the situation of the 10th group, Roja's face turned gloomy. The members of the faction didn't dare to make any noise. They quickly rushed to the entrance of the forest, and found that the field was already filled with people lying on the ground. Most of the contestants were injured by the overdose of the poison. What was going on? Why was he so happy when he was injured and eliminated? Brother Luoya. Just now, the referee of the competition came over and told me that they judged that I obtained the crystal to reach the advancement requirement of 10 minutes. After the substitute was damaged, they announced that I successfully advanced. The black-haired teenager widened his eyes when he heard Paul's words. After asking, he knew that Paul had successfully obtained a crystal in the melee and held on for 10 minutes. But before he could leave the field, he was attacked by Gelt's curse power. As a result, his substitute was destroyed, and the aftermath also caused damage to Paul at that time. Listening to the excited noises of the nearby faction members, Luoya breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, his heart relaxed a lot. He was even happier than when he advanced, because the significance of this Challenger's Cup was far more important to Paul than others. Paul himself might not have thought of this, but as a friend, Luoya was very clear. Therefore, during this period of time, the teenager focused on training him. But what Luoya didn't expect was that because of the dispute with the knight's country, Paul actually became one of the targets of the other party, and he was almost eliminated because of it. The teenager with dark clouds in his heart thought so, and decided to take action immediately. Chapter 386. After comforting Paul for a while, Luoya heard that it was only a minor injury. After confirming that it would not affect the next match, Luoya immediately began to check the competition list to see if there were other people in the same situation as Paul who encountered the transfer student. As a result, there were 2 matches. This seems to be fine. In the first match, when Nua Iyer and Juliana met, the nature of their curse power determined that Juliana couldn't take advantage of them. Combined with Nua Iyer's own strength, it could be judged that there was no danger. It was better to say that Miss Angel didn't find trouble with them. Luoya knew what was going on in this match. Probably Geralt was running for his life now. But the 2 of them would probably not give the qualification to others. However, after this breakthrough, there were 2 Source Level 4 people in the Green Rose faction. As the deputy minister, Geralt also became the face of the faction and the department. This competition was a task given by Luoya. He also promised that he would do his best, so there shouldn't be any problems. After looking at the list of people, Luoya sent contact people to these 2 groups to be on the safe side. Luoya himself went to the venue with Paul and other winners of the primary to register and receive medals. 1 second, remember 99% elimination rate. This probability could be said to be a real army crossing a single plank bridge. It didn't seem excessive to give a commemorative medal to the players who rushed out. However, when they were registering and receiving the medal, a tall figure made many students, including Paul, change their faces. What is this guy doing? Seeing Gelt approaching, the students around Luoya were a little nervous for a while, but the other party didn't mean to be violent at all. The tall man stopped in front of Luoya and others. He looked at Paul, who was staring at him, and didn't speak. After a moment of silence, he turned his gaze to Luoya. Talk alone? Okay, let's go over there. Mr. Luoya, I heard that the skeleton you used was a giant named Gulandair. Is this true? When the black-haired youth heard Gelt's question, he calmly replied with a question. Mr. Luoya, I'm afraid you don't know this, but the name Gulandair is not glorious in our clan's records. He is a tyrant and a degenerate. He is an extremely evil person. I suggest you cut off all contact with him immediately. Hearing Gelt's words, Luoya's brows wrinkled. He looked at the tall man in front of him, thinking about his words, and couldn't help but feel unhappy. That's right. He's a famous criminal in the records of our clan. His name is very special, so it shouldn't be wrong. Fallen ones are good at disguising themselves. You might not know much about him. Hearing the tall man's words, the black-haired youth refuted with a rare look of anger. Geert said in a low voice, "Oh, history. I really didn't expect someone to talk about history with our race. Then let me ask you, Mr. Gelt, do you know how much of the history you read is true and how much is false?" Chapter 387. After the conflict with Gelt, Luoya calmed down his anger, readjusted his state of mind, and fell into deep thought. Undead creatures were a race that was naturally rejected by humans. Most of them had no sense of reason at all. In ancient times, they were tempted to fall into depravity. There weren't many of them, but the problem was that not all undead creatures were evil, especially the higher-level ones. They were less affected by the undead attribute, and could choose their own side. In the distant ancient times, the mythical races were united by the side of the creator, Shia. They were chosen by the creator, and one of them was the undead. If the undead could only do evil, Shia would have wiped them out long ago unless he was a necrophiliac. There were too many possible guesses as to why the Gulandayer was described as an evil god who committed all kinds of crimes. The most likely reason was that it was slandered by later generations. However, the specific details would have to be asked by the person involved. After waiting in the venue for nearly an hour, the preliminary round of the dozen groups finally ended. Through the reports of the faction members, Luoya had a general understanding of the situation so far. It could be seen that Juliana was different from Gelt. She didn't carry out Williams's orders well. She was the type who prioritized her own interests. On the other hand, Brittany was even more so. But to a certain extent, she resolutely carried out Williams's orders. Outside the secret realm of Group 12, Jello, who had completed the preliminary round, looked like he was paralyzed. According to the gray-haired young man, Brittany didn't care about the others at all. She chased after him like a mad dog. Jello had been running for more than 3 hours, and he knelt on the ground as soon as he came out of the door. As a first-year faction that wasn't qualified to participate in the competition, including Paul, who unexpectedly advanced, 3 of the Green Rose members made it into the semi-finals. This was undoubtedly exciting. According to Luoya's knowledge, the Nua Ire and Xia Luo's Gold and Red factions had gathered so many nobles, but no more than 5 of them made it to the semi-finals. Luoya commented as he looked at the excited members of Blue Rose. However, he did not immediately congratulate them as he still had other matters to attend to. The Armor Hall was the name of this building. It was said that it was the residence of an old teacher who was obsessed with knight culture and spirit. After his death, he donated it to St. Freya Academy. The entire hall had more than 100 sets of knight armor and weapons. It could be called a small knight culture museum. Without a doubt, this was a preferential treatment for Williams and the others who didn't participate in the entrance exam and didn't have any actual achievements. The outside world had also criticized this before. However, now that the 7 people from the country of knights had all advanced, these voices of dissatisfaction quickly disappeared. Through the open door, the blonde Brittany was surprised to see the young man outside. Luoya also revealed his purpose. Your Highness Williams, in the preliminary round of the Challengers Cup, the transfer students from the country of knights attacked the contestants from the Green Rose faction. As far as I know, this seems to be your order. Can you explain? It's not against the rules, but as a student of St. Freya Academy, I don't think this kind of internal strife is worth promoting, especially in such an important competition. Facing the black-haired young man's questioning, Williams, who was wearing armor, said so without showing the slightest apology. Instead, he asked Luoya a question. Your Highness Williams, perhaps in your eyes, this method is indeed unfair, but according to the rules of the Challengers Cup, the tournament recognizes and allows friendly students to help each other. In official words, connections and luck are also part of one's strength. In fact, during the tournament, there are indeed student groups that gather with the academy as a unit. That you're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.